I'm Bradley.
And I'm Brendan. And on today's episode of Story Proof, we're going to be talking about Oppenheimer.
Woo!
The now Oscar-winning Oppenheimer. I apologize.
Woo!
Yeah, we're recording this only a couple of days after the most recent Oscar ceremony.
It got a few awards.
Just a few, 7, Best Picture, Best Director, couple of acting Oscars.
I mean, it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, it was really good. I remember when we first went to see it back last July when it was in theaters, and I think our immediate reactions upon the ending of the film were like, well, first of all, everybody was just kind of in stunned silence.
Yeah, okay, let me tell you about when we saw this in theaters. So, you guys might not necessarily get as much of a sense of this, but I love movies. But Brendan has such a high standard for movies that it is very difficult to impress him with movies. Don't even give me that look.
Okay,
you know it's true.
It's not that true.
It is 100% true.
I am certainly more of the cinema nerd than you are.
There have been so many movies I have left and been like, I had such a good time. That was so much fun. And you walk out and you're just like, eh. That's almost been the exact response.
No, it's not quite that simple. I've had plenty of fun in those movies, too. I wouldn't say that they were good movies.
You just don't have fun. But when Oppenheimer finished, so if you don't know, the movie's 3 hours. It is a bit of a long movie.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't really feel it, though.
Well, the reason I say that is because the credits are also quite long.
Well.
And my God, if you've seen this movie, you know that last shot, the last ending bit going into the credits is awesome. And then the credits are rolling and we're just sitting there. And people are getting up and leaving and we are just sitting there in silence as the credits roll. And I mean, we sat there through all of it. And then the credits finally finish and Brendan just goes, fuck. And I was like, I feel like that is the greatest one-word review of a movie I've ever heard in my life. And yeah. I started giggling like a madman because I'm like, that's the best response I've ever seen a movie get. To hear that from you, I'm like, it's a good movie. I mean, I knew that before that, but dude, it was good. This is definitely one of the few times that I've left a theater and just almost could not at the time find the words to describe the movie.
Yeah, honestly, to some extent, I worry about doing this because I'm not sure I could still find all the words needed to talk about this.
Dude, it's a lot. Even beyond the fact of, again, how long the movie is, there's so much great about this movie. There are so many awesome characters and moments and filmmaking things that it is genuinely hard to narrow down the stuff to talk about and the stuff that would make this episode 12 hours long.
Yeah. If we went point by point like we've been wont to do in previous episodes, we'd be here for a long time. This would be like a 3-part episode.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you just call us out on our own channel?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, I did.
100% fair.
Don't worry, we are self-aware about these sorts of things.
But yeah, dude, if you haven't seen this movie, go see this movie. It is so good.
I think it's available on certain streaming sites now, and you can easily, purchase it, rent it.
Yeah. So I may have mentioned it at some point in time. I pretty much have all of my movies through Vudu. Yeah. That's where my giant movie collection is at this point. Most of the time, I will wait for a movie to come out and then maybe go on sale at some point in time. This one, no. Day one, drop, bought it.
Yeah.
I was like, I will pay full price for this. I am not waiting to watch this movie again.
Yeah, I personally like to have the physical media of movies that I choose to purchase. So I bought the DVD and Blu-ray day one. Yeah. It does come with a Movies Anywhere code, so I can get it digitally too. But
so you're saying I bought it when I didn't need to? Cool. Appreciate that.
To be fair, I didn't realize it had a Movie Anywhere code before you bought it, so
that's fine. I literally, that was one of the movies I was looking at the release date for digital and just waiting for it.
Oh yeah, I remember you complaining constantly, man, why will this thing get out of theater so that I can buy it?
It was going for so long.
It premiered in July, and it was still in theaters in November, October, November, because that was one of the conditions that Christopher Nolan had when he jumped from Warner Brothers to Universal, because Universal distributed this movie.
Yeah.
It was, this movie needs to be in theaters for set amount of weeks, and it just happened that late July to late October, early November. I can't exactly remember when it went, but I remember you sitting there and just like, man, when will this thing come out? I want it. And I kept telling you, it's not going to be till like Black Friday weekend. It's just,
I had to wait too long, but it was worth it. It's a good movie.
Yeah, it's very good, and we'll talk about it. I think it's truly Christopher Nolan's best work.
Yeah.
Like, I love The Dark Knight. I love some of his other stuff. This is the best work that he's ever put out.
Yeah.
Even from the very first shot of the film, you get this very clear through line with this ripple effect that's inside of the... there's rain, and it's coming down into a puddle, and Oppenheimer's just sitting there staring at it.
He does that a lot.
he stares very pensively at a lot of things. Rightfully so, with what's going to happen. But he's sitting here, and usually during these times, it's where you're starting to get the sense immediately of, okay, he's trying to figure out how this works. This is how his mind works, and everything else. But you're getting these ripples in the puddle, and it's sort of a nice metaphor for what's to come, with the ripple effect of everything that's about to be shown to you, and everything that's about to happen, from not just the Manhattan Project, but the choices that Oppenheimer makes in his life, the choices that Robert Downey Jr.'s character Strauss makes in his life, and every other major plot line is all just ripple effects from one thing to another that leads us into this present day.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting when you talk about the different effects, there are multiple timelines. So it is ultimately one story for this movie, but we do follow multiple timelines at the same time.
It's your usual Christopher Nolan thing. If you've seen one Christopher Nolan movie, you know he likes to play with the non-linear timelines and everything else.
Yep.
But this first one starts off with Oppenheimer in his early days at Cambridge. He's gone to England to study, because in America in the early 1900s, there's no place for quantum physics.
Yep.
It's a relatively new form of study that ultimately Oppenheimer is kind of a pioneer of.
Yep. Is actively referred to as the one who brought quantum physics and quantum mechanics to America.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is an interesting scene where he's in class, and it's very clear that he is not... He even says, like, he's useless in the lab. Like, he's trying to do experiments and just breaking stuff, knocking stuff over, terrible at it.
Yeah.
But he wants to go to a presentation given by a very well-known individual in the scientific community. Is it Niels Bohr?
Niels Bohr.
I don't know why I was coming up on it. I was starting to second guess, like, am I about to mispronounce his name?
No.
So he wants to go see Niels Bohr give his, I believe it's just pretty much like a presentation at the Institute. And he does end up getting to go see it. And you see, throws his hand up. He has a question. There's a scene just a little after this where he is in class and Bohr is talking to his teacher. And Bohr mentions that Oppenheimer asked the same question at 2 different lectures. And he was like, why? And Oppenheimer says, I didn't like your answer the first time. Like, that is so funny, but it really sets up this character pretty well.
Yeah.
And then Bohr's even asked, what did you think about it the second time? Oh, I really liked your answer the second time. This is very funny. I will also say that the actor they got to play Niels Bohr, dude, crushes it. He's so good.
It's Kenneth Branagh, who... a lot of people know him nowadays from being in the Hercule Poirot films, like Murder on the Orient Express. For those of a certain age, you'll know him as Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter and the Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
That's definitely what I know.
I'm sorry. And then, of course, his many, many Shakespeare adaptations throughout his career. He's regarded as one of the great living actors.
He's very good. This movie does a remarkable job with characters and casting where people will come on screen and they leave a surprisingly big impact for really not being on screen that much.
Yeah.
He's one of those that I feel like kind of steals the show in his little bit of time he gets. I just have such a blast getting to see him on screen, despite, not being on screen all that much.
Yeah, and it's at the same time we jump to this other timeline
Mm-hmm.
where we have Louis Strauss, who is being how should I put it?
Like
He's
screened or interviewed.
he's been nominated to be Commerce Secretary under President Eisenhower
Mm-hmm.
in the latter part of President Eisenhower's administration, 58, I believe. Um, and so he's going through the Commerce Committee hearing to be sent to the full floor to confirm. Uh, it's very much American politics thing, the way that the Senate and presidential cabinet appointments work. Not going to get into that too much here. Basically, just know he's up for Commerce Secretary. They're choosing whether or not to advance him and confirm him or not.
Yeah, and very interesting movie thing here is that the movie goes to black and white for these scenes.
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice because during Oppenheimer's scenes, it's been color, obviously, and then during Strauss's scenes, it's black and white. And for the most part, they really don't shift from that.
No.
You will see both characters together at certain points, but there are points of view with each that are kind of communicated in that way. You can read it in a couple of different ways. The black and white for Strauss, you can read it as maybe either that's the more objective historical look, the way that he's presenting things, or more likely it's just that he's very rigid in how he sees the events that are being talked about and how they transpired, and he's seeing that he's the one who's in the right on most things, whereas Oppenheimer, being in color most of the time, is more open and less rigid about the way that he goes, and it's more subjective in that way. That's just the filmmaking aspect of looking at it.
Yeah, I will say from like a character standpoint, I like when you talk about how Strauss is very much like he's in the right. One thing I really enjoy about this movie with Oppenheimer is there are a number of moments where he fully acknowledges the fact that he is a flawed human being. Like, he has an ego the size of Manhattan, but there are multiple moments, like when he talks about with Dr. Lawrence later on, where Dr. Lawrence is like, oh, is your brother Frank okay? And Oppenheimer is like, he's fine. He just has a shitty brother. He's literally talking about himself, which I think is very funny.
He's very self-aware of his own faults and flaws and everything else, which I appreciate.
Yeah, and I feel like Cillian Murphy, in particular, sells it very well.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer.
Dude, there are not enough great things to say.
It's an all-timer performance. He very much deserved the Oscar that he won. It's very understated. It's very underplayed in that way. Usually you think of like big Oscar winner roles. They're more bombastic. They're bigger. They're about the personality of the thing. This one's very internalized, and it's very well done. Like, this is probably the best I've seen Cillian Murphy,
and that is frankly saying something.
Yeah, because he's done a lot of great stuff over his career.
Yeah, the characters that are in this movie. I think the story is fantastic. I think all of the movie making stuff is fantastic. The writing is fantastic. But dude, for me, it's just the characters. Like, everyone's casting in this is absolutely spot on from beginning to end.
Yeah, this is honestly like, you hear the term bandied around in like filmmaking and acting circles that there are no small parts.
Yeah.
Like, if there's ever a movie that kind of exemplified that saying, it's this one.
Yeah.
Like, you get little roles for like Jack Quaid shows up for like 5 seconds.
I forgot he was in it.
And Josh Peck is in this for like 5 minutes. Like, like there's just so many random. Rami Malek shows up for like 2 minutes just to really be the moral center at the very finale.
Yep, forgot he was in it too.
Like, there's so many like name actors that are in this thing that play just 5-minute roles.
Yeah.
Because the Manhattan Project is just such an expansive thing.
So if you've seen this movie, you know that there are a few different plots that it follows pretty much at the same time. So when we discuss this, there are 3 different timelines. Yeah. We're going to do them one at a time, even though if you watch the movie, they're kind of intercut with each other. Because ultimately it boils down to where the bulk of our story takes place, which is the main Oppenheimer timeline following his life. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about in a minute, more or less ending with the success of the Manhattan Project. And then the secondary timeline is him as he is being prosecuted? Persecuted, not prosecuted.
Well, prosecuted is probably more accurate and inaccurate because it's not technically a prosecution, as they also like to point out in the film itself. But it's a hearing before a group of individuals to determine whether Oppenheimer can have his security clearance redone or not.
Yeah, so that's the second timeline that we follow, and then the third is Robert Downey Jr.'s character as he is going through. Again, I'm trying not to say too much of it now because we are going to get there. But that's the third timeline. So instead of us trying to jump around for the different timelines as the movie does, for the sake of ease of use of discussing it, we're going to do the first timeline, then the second, then the third. That is the order they take place in.
Yeah.
So we just want to go ahead and put that little caveat up front. Hopefully it's not confusing. I don't think it will be. We'll be here for you. It's okay. we've got this.
We're gonna serve as the therapists in this episode, I guess.
Oh yes.
I don't know.
But yeah, this movie, it is quite long. In case you somehow were not aware of that, 180 minutes. That is not a short film.
No, that's 3 hours. It's not the longest film I've ever seen, nor is it the longest film that was released last year. That might honestly go to Killers of the Flower Moon. But
so yeah, we are going to start at the beginning of the movie, and it starts with a very young J. Robert Oppenheimer. He is such a little baby in the start of this.
Yeah, he's studying at Cambridge, but the first time we see him, he's staring very pensively at the ripples in a puddle caused by the rain.
Yeah, this movie has a lot of time and scenes dedicated to Oppenheimer, seeing all the different waves and threads and interlacing, and a lot of really cool imagery, particularly at the end of the movie.
Yeah, it really is a cool way of sort of showing how his mind works and sees sort of the physics behind everything, because he is a physicist. And all of this is really cool because it's all in-camera effects. There's no CGI or anything like that. Like, there's one where Oppenheimer's laying in his bed at one point, just staring up into space, and you see these little concentric circles like orbiting in front of him, kind of like a neutron or something like that. And that was done by just sticking like silver marbles or something on the end of sticks attached to like an oscillating fan or something like that. And it's just, God,
dude, it's such a cool movie.
It's so cool. It's so cool what Hoytema and Nolan did to really just do everything without the use of CGI. Then the ripple effects are really also at this very moment in this first shot really setting up kind of one of the core themes of the movie, which is these ripple effects that are going to sort of inhabit Oppenheimer's life and then his legacy.
I will say this movie, since we're about to start getting into characters as well, dude, this is one of the most well-cast movies I've ever known of to exist.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. This one's really, really well done.
So good.
Like, Cillian Murphy is Oppenheimer, and he is phenomenal. He just won Best Actor for it. And it's
definitely one of those characters that I feel like this is very much a magnum opus role for him.
No.
Like, yeah. I've always liked Cillian Murphy, but this is one of the first times where I've seen him in a movie and just been almost speechless at his performance. It is absolutely fantastic. And I especially like this movie that you get to follow this character for the majority of his life.
Yeah.
I mean, we start with him in his 20s and we go well past that by the end of the movie. It's really cool. It's really cool to get to see the progression of the character as well. Not just progression through his life, but the actual changes of the character. But yeah, when we start with him, he is in school. There is a funny thing that comes back a few times where he's very good at the theoretical side, but when it comes to like his lab work, some of the more like physical stuff, he's not good at it.
Or the math. He's not great at.
Yeah, we don't quite get the math one like yet, but yeah, he's not great at the math. But I do especially like when they're all in the lab and everyone's working. He's just like breaking shit.
He breaks the beakers and everything else, and it's just
yeah.
And that's the excuse that the professor has for not allowing him to go to a lecture that he wants to go to. That day.
Given by Niels Bohr.
Yep.
The interaction that they have is one of my favorite interactions in the history of movies, where Bohr, I think maybe like the next scene, comes into the classroom, and he says something to Oppenheimer about, "Oh, you're the young man that asked the same question at 2 different lectures." And he's like, "Yes." He's like, "Why did you ask the question a second time?" And he's like, "I didn't like your answer the first time."
Yeah.
And then he's like, "What about the second time?" He's like, "Oh, I enjoyed it very much the second time."
Yeah, you had a good answer this time.
One thing I'm curious about, because they don't really say, I wonder if his answer changed, or if like, I like to think of it that Oppenheimer is just able to grasp more of it the second time, so maybe that's why he liked the answer the second time better.
Maybe.
I feel like that's a bit more likely than a scientist who's very in his field being like, "I'm gonna change my answer because a student asked me a question."
Yeah. I imagine it was probably the same answer, and it's just that Oppenheimer either liked the way it was put this time, or as you said, it was just sort of he understood it better that time around.
That's kind of the way that I think of it, because they don't specify it. There is also a thing where he almost poisons his teacher. Freaking puts cyanide in an apple on the teacher's desk.
So that one's kind of more. It probably didn't happen in real life. It's kind of a contested story. It probably didn't happen, but it's an interesting point nonetheless. Like, this guy is so emotionally broken at this point. He's already discussed sort of where he's been really homesick. We've seen him like crying in bed at one point. At this point. Yeah.
Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
So he's where am I going with
I don't know. Can't help you with that one.
Anyway, yeah, the cyanide in the apple thing is kind of contested, but it really comes back pretty good. So he puts the cyanide in the apple the day of the lecture, because he was left behind from the lecture to have to clean up everything. And he leaves the apple on the professor's desk, and then he goes into class the next day, and that's when he meets Bohr, and they have that conversation you mentioned. And Bohr the whole time is holding on to the darn apple, and he goes to take a bite at the end of the conversation, and Oppenheimer just has to quickly snatch it out of his hand.
I think he knocks it out of his hand, and they don't question it.
No, he says that there was a wormhole. He saw a wormhole in there, which is kind of a fun little thing based on the physics and everything else. I like in this conversation as well that they have the conversation about him not being very good in the lab or in mathematics. And Bohr has that one moment where he says physics is like music, and you don't have to be able to read the music as long as you can hear the music or play the music. Can you play the music? And that really, I think, seems to shift Oppenheimer's entire way of looking at things, because then we get this like just clear montage of the way that he sees the world, and he's like he's throwing glasses against the floor to see how they shatter. He's seeing more of the whizzing lights
too. He's just like, "Yes, this pleases me." It's a funny scene. It's not played for laughs, but it is funny to see.
I think the idea behind it is that, they don't shatter the same way each time, so it's kind of just him trying to work through, the irrationality of the universe. So after that whole montage with Oppenheimer going through and crushing glasses and seeing, the physics of the world, he's next shown giving a lecture in front of an audience, and this is where we meet probably one of my favorite characters in the movie. This is Isidore Robbie, played by David Krumholtz. Most people probably know him from the Santa Claus. He played Bernard the Elf. Really, he serves, in my opinion, as sort of a conscience, a moral compass and a conscience for Oppenheimer in all ways. And he's really probably Oppenheimer's best friend, I would say.
I genuinely enjoy him as a character.
Yeah.
He has a lot of really funny moments. He seems like a very real person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do talking about funny moments. One of the ones right off the bat, is he goes to see Oppenheimer give a lecture, and he's sitting next to someone and is like, "Hey, if you need help with the translation from like English to I can help you with it." And then Oppenheimer immediately starts giving his lecture in Dutch. It is one of those perfect timing things in the movie. It's fantastic.
And just to note, Cillian Murphy freaking learned Dutch to actually be able to pull that off for this role. Like, the joke is that Robbie can't understand what Oppenheimer is saying because Oppenheimer's speaking Dutch. So he turns to the guy and is like, "Hey, what's he saying?"
So when we get Robbie and Oppenheimer on the train, this is my favorite scene in this movie. It is just absolutely fantastic acting between the two of them. It feels so natural, the back and forth that they have. Robbie is very much able to kind of poke fun at Oppenheimer, while at the same point in time being very respectful of him, knowing just how good he is at this. This is also, I think, probably the first time in the movie where it's really brought up the fact that both of these guys are Jewish. There is a funny thing where he says a line to Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer's like, "What?" And he tells him it means like show off. He's like, "You learned Dutch and you never learned any Yiddish." Yeah. But it is very clear immediately that these two are friends and that Robbie is definitely in more of this movie. Thank God.
Yeah, Robbie and Oppenheimer are both physicists of varying disciplines, and so they go back and forth, as you said. They sort of needle at one another, and then it comes around to how no matter what, they don't, at least Robbie for sure doesn't get the sense that they're very welcome, because this is 1930s Germany.
They do meet someone very interesting in this.
Yeah, after the conversation on the train, they've made their way to meet Heisenberg, another another figure in the physics realm. Not just somebody that's referenced on Breaking Bad a lot.
I was literally going to say, it's like, not Walter White. Yeah, I will say that one of the things that really impressed me about this movie and the casting is how well they did with casting some of these historic characters. These historic people with Bohr, Heisenberg, particularly Einstein. His is the one that I'm like, this is almost creepy. This is exactly what I imagine this guy looks and sound like.
Yeah.
It's so good. But yeah, they do meet Heisenberg. They are wanting to expand quantum physics research in the U.S. There is a really funny thing where he's like, why don't you learn this in the U.S.? And Oppenheimer's like, no one's teaching this in the U.S. So the idea is he's going to bring it to the U.S. and start teaching it.
Yeah.
Heisenberg, I don't believe is in the movie again. I think he's mentioned a few times, but I don't think his actual character is. So we just get this one kind of little scene.
Yeah, this is the only time you see him. He's referenced a couple times because ultimately Heisenberg is the one who is tapped to lead the German charge towards an atomic weapon during the war.
Yeah.
He's basically Oppenheimer's foil in that sense.
There's also a very nice moment where we get a little bit of foreshadowing where Oppenheimer mentions the fact that he has a ranch. And where is that ranch located?
New Mexico.
Oh my God, that's so crazy.
Yeah, there's another fun little exchange here with Robbie and Oppenheimer where
the cowboy.
Heisenberg is talking back and forth, and Oppenheimer mentions that he has this ranch in New Mexico, and Heisenberg calls them both cowboys, both him and Robbie. And Robbie's like, "Oh no, you couldn't get me on a horse." No, that's his area. It's just making these people feel real, like they truly were alive, and that they have distinct personalities and distinct.
Yeah. It's one of those things I've talked about in a number of episodes before about just having characters feel lived in.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's almost hard to do, but not hard to do. On paper, it's really easy to do, but in acting standpoint, it can be a bit more difficult. And I just think these guys nail it from one end to the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, then we do see Oppenheimer going back to the U.S. and starting to teach.
Yeah, he gets jobs at both Caltech and Berkeley. He's very quick to tell us that that's what happened.
Yeah.
As part of his testimony, which he's the first person to take quantum physics seriously in the United States, so it makes sense that he would be teaching at multiple areas. And I think this is a really great example here of just the infectious personality that Oppenheimer was supposed to have had throughout his life.
This scene, man.
Because in this scene, he meets Josh Hartnett.
Oh God, I'm so glad to see him in a movie again.
Playing Dr. Lawrence, and Josh Hartnett is very good in this movie.
Dude, so for us who were born in the early '90s, dude, Josh Hartnett was like the dude in a ton of movies, just back to back to back, and then kind of, for the most part, disappeared.
Yeah, I'm sure he's been in like smaller roles in movies and stuff like that. I haven't looked at his filmography, but he was a pretty big star. I think of like Halloween H2O, and then
oh wow, you went with a weird one. I was thinking Black Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down. I forgot about Black Hawk Down.
Pearl Harbor.
I thought about.
H2O was your first one. That's it makes sense, but that's not where I was thinking.
That's what I think of with Josh Hartnett, honestly, is H2O. Oh, Michelle Williams.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Black Hawk Down's always my first and foremost, because that's one of those like supercast movies that just has big names across the board.
Yeah, just like this one.
Yeah, really makes me think of this one too.
But yeah, Josh Hartnett, really fun to see him in this, and he does
playing such a good character.
Yeah, he's great. He's a guy who is working in another part of the physics department, and he's kind of Oppenheimer's like friend on the faculty and stuff like that early on.
Yeah, he is a friend of Oppenheimer, but he is also very easily frustrated with him.
Yeah,
where he's very much like, dude, you have to keep your politics out of the classroom. This isn't the place for that. This isn't what you should be doing here. You're going to get in trouble for doing this. And the whole time Oppenheimer's like, I don't give a fuck. Yeah,
Oppenheimer throughout this movie is shown, and it goes back a little bit to sort of the metaphorical ripple effect. Oppenheimer is one of those in a long line of, very smart, intelligent people who are very good at what they do, but don't have a lot of either self-awareness or social awareness. And those associations can sometimes bring you down, especially in the times that he lived in.
Yeah.
Going into the war and then the Red Scare after. But going back to Oppenheimer's infectious personality, he's talking about having just one student, and we see this one student come into his classroom. The student thinks he's in the wrong place because there's nobody else there except Oppenheimer in the room. So he starts to leave, and Oppenheimer's like, no, stay. This is the right place. And starts giving a lecture, and then all of a sudden, while he's giving the lecture, the camera comes back around, and there's a whole classroom full of students there.
Well, we do see them build a little bit as you go, and it is shown almost like he's giving one never-ending lecture, and you just get to see it grow. And it's one of those things where they sell it so perfectly in like 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And it just shows it. It's so effortless.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a fantastic scene.
Yeah, and it really fits, like I said, with that reporting from Oppenheimer's life, where he was very well-liked and very easy to get along with, and very magnetic in terms of people gravitating towards him.
Yep.
And for better or worse, it just continues throughout his life. Uh,
Speaking of people that are just drawn to him, boy, he's a bit of a womanizer for a while.
Yeah. So after getting through this first bit of teaching with the montage, this is where his more political side comes in, because he joins his brother and his brother's girlfriend at a meeting for the Communist Party of the United States.
So one of my favorite scenes in this, where it just, I think the girlfriend's name is Jackie.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's so funny that I would love to know if this was maybe like a Christopher Nolan thing, or if this was a Cillian Murphy thing, where he gets out of his car, he's outside of a house to go inside to the party. His brother comes up and says, "Oh, hi, this is Jackie." Freaking Oppenheimer waves at her, but he's right in front of her. I mean, it's like 2 feet away. It is so awkward and funny.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, he gives this goofy grin and he waves. He's right in front of her. She's looking at him. They are making eye contact. It is fucking hilarious. Now that I've made a big deal about it, if you go watch it, you're gonna be like, "That's 1 second up," but it's so funny.
It's a funny moment, and it can be played off as just like, oh, yeah, he's being socially awkward. But I think at the same time, it's kind of like he's almost not giving her the proper attention.
Because even later on, he goes to say her name, and either her or the brother is like, "Still Jackie."
It's both of them.
Oh, it's both of them?
Yeah.
I will say, when you mentioned the thing about him being self-aware, I feel like he is very self-aware of who he is as a person.
Yeah.
Because there's one of my favorite lines in this movie. I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but there's a thing where he is talking to Hartnett's character after having a little bit of a tiff with his brother.
Yeah.
And Hartnett's character asks him, like, "Oh, is your brother okay?" And Oppenheimer says he's okay. He just like has an asshole for a brother.
Yeah.
Like, he's very self-aware that he's not perfect, but
yeah, he's aware of his own flaws, but he's not aware of how his actions in public and who he chooses to associate with can affect him as well as those around him.
Yeah.
So
I think there's also an interesting dynamic he has where it's almost like he has not like split personalities, but split opinions of the versions of himself. So like, he's very aware that as a person he is very flawed. He's aware of these flaws, but then when it gets to the more scientist side, the more physics related side, there are definitely moments where he says something and you're like, "Oh, this dude's really full of himself."
Yeah.
So it is interesting. It's yet again, when you talk about the acting for Cillian Murphy in this, is he manages to sell it and just walk that fine line so perfectly the entirety of this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, he does have one of the weirdest sex scenes I think I've ever seen in a movie. Florence Pugh is one of my favorite people. Not only do I think she is awesome, I think she is hilarious. I think she's really well cast in this movie.
Yeah.
This fucking sex scene is so weird that even in theaters, I remember looking at you and being like, "Why is this happening?" Like, what is going on?
Oppenheimer's magnetic personality. Man.
Yeah, you know what, though? Show them smooshing booties and be done with it. We don't need... Okay. I'm not going to talk about sex anymore. But he does meet Florence Pugh's character,
Jean Tadlock.
I always forget. I remember her last name. I remember her first name. He does meet her at the party, and they are just immediately shown to be hitting it off, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah, they're flirting over different interpretations of of Karl Marx's work, and like Oppenheimer read it in the original German, so it's a little bit different than what the Americanized version is, and it's very much one of those things where like anybody else would have been turned off, but Jean Tadlock was just here for it.
Dude, she is such an interesting character in this.
Yeah.
She has a lot of great moments. I freaking love the thing with flowers with him.
Yeah.
Where she just like constantly gets mad at him for bringing her flowers, and even again jumping ahead a little bit, even when he like goes to break up with her, she's like, "At least you didn't bring flowers," and he kind of laughs and then like reaches over, he fucking brought flowers.
Yeah, because I think Oppenheimer's very much drawn to be more invested in their relationship as it goes, as opposed to Tadlock. And not to say that Tadlock isn't necessarily invested, because there are scenes later on that show her emotionally in regards to the relationship, but this is a very significant relationship in Oppenheimer's life, and his and Tadlock's relationship are very much weaved into those flaws that are going to come and eventually lead to Oppenheimer's downfall, in some ways.
Yeah.
There's another important person that he meets in this party, too. Chevalier.
Oh, yeah. Dude, one of my favorite characters in this.
And this guy is, I believe it's Jefferson Hall, right? Who played the psychologist, or, I'm sorry.
The podcaster.
The podcaster in Halloween 2018, and was in Game of Thrones and House of Dragon. So he plays Hawkins Chevalier.
Now's a good time to tell you guys we're just doing all the Jefferson Hall movies we know of on the podcast.
Oh, good.
This is the end of the list, though. This is all I know him from. Dude, he is such a good character, and I love how many characters in this movie. Again, that sense of them feeling lived in particular. I feel like especially I love later on, that as soon as Oppenheimer starts to have problems and he asks for help, his friend is immediately like, absolutely, yes, I'm here, I'll help you, kind of like whatever you need. I like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel like in movies sometimes it's just nothing but shitty people characters. It's just nice to see good ones.
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting because, I've been talking about Oppenheimer's failure to see the flaws in the people around him and everything else, and some of it is down to his naivete as well. This character in particular is very much played into that, Chevalier, because they become friends here at the party, and he plays a significant part later on, as we'll discuss throughout the plot, because he has a couple of very key scenes during this part of Oppenheimer's story. But he is also I believe he's a literature professor at the university. And it's at the same time where he's first talking to Chevalier that we kind of get the first hint of what Oppenheimer's main focus is at this point in terms of his studies in physics, and it's black holes.
Yep.
Which is interesting.
So cool, man.
Like, he's sitting here talking about how, a star such as the sun will, as its life expires, will collapse in upon itself and create this dense field of gravity that just sucks all the light in. And they don't say black hole specifically, but that's exactly what they're talking about.
100%.
Is that, and it's just so fun to see that. One thing I appreciate about this movie is that for all of the talk of like the science and the math and everything else, I feel like they make it very accessible to people who are not.
It never feels like it gets bogged down in it.
Yeah.
Because I know there are a few movies, even things that you and I have watched, that are very like history in particular.
Yeah.
And sometimes my sister will be like, "Would I like this?" And I'm like, "Hell no! If you're not like a real history buff type person, this is not your movie. If you are not a science buff type person, this is still a great movie for you to watch."
Like I like science fine. I cannot grasp the finer points of physics and everything else.
Yeah.
And I definitely cannot understand half of the math that they're drawing on these boards half the time. But man, it is so accessible. And I appreciate that.
This movie's so good. This movie's so fucking good, man.
And so the next big thing we really see is the same is the scene on September 1st, 1939. So the next thing we see is Oppenheimer and Lawrence and Oppenheimer's brother, all on a little guys trip to
Camping trip.
little guys camping trip to the Oppenheimer boys' land in New Mexico. And they're riding on their horses out into the desert to go set up camp, and it's rainy and stormy and all that. And so they set up camp. They're hanging out in the tent. They're chatting, as they would. And it's here where Oppenheimer and his brother start to have a bit of a tiff about Oppenheimer's brother joining the Communist Party.
So when you said tiff, that is the exact word I was going to use to describe it.
And Lawrence kind of pieces himself out now that the rain is done because he doesn't want to be a part of this conversation anyway.
It's probably for the best.
And so after they agree to disagree on this whole thing, Oppenheimer goes out, joins Lawrence, and he's looking up at the sky, and he's like, I think I can see one of your dark stars out there.
Does he say it just like that?
Not quite like that, no. That was a bit more Jimmy Stewart than anything. And it's another reference to the black holes.
Yeah.
That Oppenheimer's been working on. And I know what is it that he says? Lawrence asks him about how that conversation went.
He's like, "Is your brother okay?" And this is where Oppenheimer says the thing, something along the lines of like, "He's fine. He just has a terrible brother."
Yeah. So it's that sort of, he understands his own flaws and who he is within himself.
Yeah.
But not how the world around him affects those, his naivete.
Yeah.
So after that, we go back to Berkeley, and this is where one of Lawrence and Oppenheimer's colleagues comes busting into the room and announces
they did it.
Yeah, announces that, oh, the Germans have found a way to split the atom. And Oppenheimer can't believe it. He goes to the whiteboard, starts doing all this complicated math to say, no, see, can't be done.
Yeah, and it's so funny. He's like, yeah, see, no, it can't be done. And then
Lawrence is coming.
We just did it down the hallway.
Yeah, see, that's a great thing. Very sound reasoning. The room next door says different. And so Oppenheimer goes in there, and they're showing, the fission wavelengths. From where the atoms were being split in this machine that they had.
Yeah.
And so this is when now they start to piece together, so if one can be split, multiples can be split.
Yeah.
And if multiples can be split, we're starting a chain reaction that can only lead to a bomb.
Yeah, the wheels start turning like immediately for all these guys.
Yeah. Going back to that age-old going back to the age-old observation that all scientific advancement is immediately looking to be weaponized.
Yep.
So
we are so awesome. Yeah, and then they go and there's a scene where they are going to have like a journal posted or an article posted in something.
Yeah, I think in regards to the black holes and everything else. And it happens to be September 1st, 1939. They think they're going to be top billed, and then his publishing partner comes in and is like, we're upstaged. Hitler invades Poland.
Yep.
So this is the start of World War II.
Yeah. So, yeah, they get upstaged a little bit.
Just a bit.
The next thing we do have in this storyline, though, is the introduction of a new, very important character. So this individual, Catherine, she goes by Kitty pretty often. She is played by Emily Blunt. And this is where this one kills me because this to me is almost like when we talked about in Halloween Ends, where two people meet and the one is just like, yes, absolutely, you, let's do this right now, let's go. Like, it is almost that level of...
Well, we've already established that Oppenheimer has a certain charm and magnetism to him where people are just drawn to his quirks.
Yeah.
And I mean, she very well establishes that she's married to an older man who just they don't really. It's more of a admiration of the minds thing than anything else. So, yeah, they meet. He takes her to New Mexico.
Mm-hmm. She does say here that she was married before.
Yeah,
and that she was very, very in love with him, but I think he got shot.
So she was married once. She was married twice before. Don't remember the fate of the first husband offhand, but the second husband, she cared for. He went to go fight in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, she does say something about like him dying for stupid reasons because he wanted to help people and make a difference, and that's what got him killed.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big point for her, is the idea of people stepping out to try to do something good.
Yeah.
She has seen how sometimes that cannot work out well for you.
Yeah. But in any case, as I said, they go to New Mexico. They
she's sold at that point. Like, I think literally the next time we see her, I think she has already divorced the one dude, married him, and I think has had a kid.
Yeah, we get a bit
next time we see her.
We get a bit of a time skip, about a year or so at this point, and they're together, they're married, they've had a child. Like,
we do have a number of things that have happened in the last, I think, year, maybe year and a half. There's a scene where in his classroom, Oppenheimer is giving almost like a speech presentation about some of his political ideas and ideals.
Well, they're talking about unionizing the teachers at the professors at the university, because teachers have a union, other people have unions. This is the 1930s, so everybody's talking about trying to get into unions to improve their lot in life and pay. And this one has something of a communist bent because of the political affiliations going through.
Yeah. And especially with Oppenheimer being so involved in it, a lot of people just sort of assume.
Yeah. So Lawrence comes barging into the room in the middle of the meeting, and he just kicks everybody out.
Yep. He tells everyone to get out except Oppenheimer.
And then Lawrence goes on to just give Oppenheimer the business about how he's working on this project and he wants to bring Oppenheimer in. Oppenheimer would be great for this project, but he can't because the government has concerns about Oppenheimer's ties to these ideals and these people that subscribe. Because Oppenheimer, he's very clear about this. He's not a part of the party. He never joins the party. He enjoys looking at the party from
like
an intellectual standpoint rather than an actual political standpoint.
Yeah.
And this is one of the key points to what eventually leads to what happens to him later on in his life. But yeah, Lawrence just gives him a dressing down and is like, I want you on this. You would need to be on this, but they can't trust you because of this. You need to cool it with this stuff, man.
And then Oppenheimer, in fairness to him, he says he will.
Yeah.
He immediately says, I will. I want to be on this project. I think I'd be good for it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that without consulting with anyone, Lawrence is like, absolutely, you're on it, bud. Let's do this. This scene is a little rough. Oppenheimer goes home. He's so happy. He's on the project. He's excited to talk to his wife about it. He walks in the house, and this is, again, one of those moments where you can tell it's been a little bit of time, because not only are they married, they have a kid.
Yeah.
That is crying as soon as he walks in the house. It's also very dark in the house. Kitty is off in like a dining room drinking by herself, which I guess you wouldn't be drinking with the baby. But she is definitely in some postpartum depression at this point.
Yeah, she's not having a great time.
Yeah, and he tries to talk to her a bit there. It does not go well. And this is one of those moments where I like that he immediately recognizes, like, we need help.
Yeah.
So he takes the baby and he takes him to Chevalier and says, "Can you and your wife please look after the baby?" And this is where I do like that he immediately is like, "Yes, absolutely." But he also says like, "Come in and let's talk."
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you need a friend. This isn't great.
Yeah, and Chevalier is having this conversation with him, and they go, and to his credit, I mean, Chevalier asks Oppenheimer, "Does Kitty know you're here, asking us to take your baby for an indefinite amount of time?" And of course, she understands. We understand. We're all terrible, selfish people.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that in this moment where, like, you're wondering, how can these people willingly give up their child necessarily like this? Oppenheimer realizes the flaw in this, where maybe they weren't really ready to be parents at this time. As you said, there's some postpartum depression going on potentially there, so like it's just all this stuff, but it's a very poignant scene.
It's a very humanizing moment.
It's very humanizing, yeah, and it really continues to set up that sort of relationship between him and Chevalier that's going to come to a head in the future.
Yeah. So after this, he is visited by one of just the best characters in this movie. So Matt Damon shows up into. I like how you were constantly using the character names and I'm using the actor names.
So Matt Damon shows up at this moment as
Leslie Groves.
Not yet General, but soon to be General Groves.
Yep.
He's
a colonel at this point.
He's a colonel. He's going to be promoted because he's in charge of the Manhattan Project.
Yep. And I do believe this is the first time we officially get the name Manhattan
this is the first time its name dropped, because this is when Oppenheimer is officially on board, but also Groves is at this point just looking for a manager of the Manhattan Project, somebody to lead it, somebody to bring it all the resources that they're going to have together to accomplish this one goal, which is to create the nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
And this is a great scene,
dude,
in and of itself.
This is my favorite. This is one of my favorite interactions they have. This and the train, dude. All the train scenes in this movie are so good. But it's I will say this is one of those scenes we don't want to go into the back and forth too much, because it's one of those you just gotta see it.
Yeah,
like we cannot do the dialogue here justice.
But it's at this point now that Oppenheimer is going to a blackboard and he's diagramming these 4 different divisions of what would be the Manhattan Project, and he's talking about how this one needs to be centered in Berkeley, this one needs to be centered where they're getting uranium in Tennessee, this one has to be in Chicago, this one has to be elsewhere, and it's all of these facets of the project. And he starts to say all 4 of these need to be all 4 of these need to be connected by rail to one central location. And where else would he choose but a little town in New Mexico, Los Alamos.
Yep.
So Oppenheimer at this moment is finally getting to live the dream he told Lawrence about so many years ago of combining physics and New Mexico together. Yeah. And that would be his perfect existence.
Yeah, it is a very interesting moment where he seems almost surprised by the idea of him being suggested for the director of the Manhattan Project, but he is also so instantly and immediately prepared to be the director. He does have the line where Groves mentions something about like the Germans have this amount of time of head start, and then Oppenheimer's like, no, it's actually like this amount of time.
Yeah, they've got about a 2-year head start, I think, is what Oppenheimer says.
Yeah, but he also does say that one thing that they have over the German troops is the level of dedication to the project.
Yeah.
Because really at that time, I think even straight up says Hitler is kind of spread across a lot of different things. And right now, with them laser focused on this, they should be able to catch up. He does mention at this point that Heisenberg would most likely, if not assuredly, be leading the German project to develop the bomb.
Yeah.
And then honestly, at this point, it's kind of off to the races, man. So a lot of recruiting, a lot of ideas. They straight up, he says, like, we need to build a town.
Yeah.
And it needs to be not just like housing, but a fully functioning town.
There's
for
like
families, schools. I think
schools,
a store.
medical office, stores, like the whole 9 yards. There's
so cool.
everything.
It's so fucking cool, and you get to see them like building it. I like the thing with Groves' assistant where Groves just keeps giving him like shit jobs to do.
Yeah.
Like tosses his hat to him. It's like, go do this.
If that's one good line in the scene where Groves first meets Oppenheimer is, well, if that's how you treat a lieutenant colonel, I would hate to see how you treat a humble physicist.
I'll tell you if I ever meet one.
If I ever meet one. That's the only line we'll get into. It's a great line. But this is honestly some of my favorite work that Matt Damon has done.
Oh yeah,
and he's done a lot of great work, especially in recent years.
Dude, he really like steals the show in just about any scene that he has. I love the one where the guy is like, they're trying to recruit a scientist, and he keeps being like, why? And Matt Damon's like, why? Because it's the most important fucking thing you'll ever do in the history of the world. That's why. And like the look on Cillian Murphy's face is priceless, because it really is like, I mean, what the fuck are you gonna say after that?
Yeah,
that's the best sales pitch you're ever gonna get.
Yeah. But so yeah, there's this montage of them recruiting, going cross country on trains, talking about who's going to be on this, who's going to be needed for this, who's going to be needed for that. And you see some cameos here of them recruiting. You've got Jack Quaid in a 5-second cameo as sort of the Niels Bohr stand-in, because they can't actually get Niels Bohr because he's trapped in Copenhagen by the Russians.
It is a very funny thing about, you should get Niels Bohr, and I'm kind of like, well, I can't. That's why I'm here asking for you.
Yeah. And then Josh Peck is in here randomly from like Drake and Josh and stuff like that.
Well, he's in it more because Jack Quaid isn't just a cameo; he's in it a bit more as well.
Yeah, I know. It's just all these random little bits. Like the cast in this movie had to be so massive because of how many people were involved in the Manhattan Project. So you've got these, known actors who are playing like bit parts just to be able to say, "Hey, I was in a Christopher Nolan movie," but it's wild, man. So after the montage, they get back to Berkeley, and you get a few of the minds of one of these teams coming together. You've got Hans Bethe and Edward Teller coming through, and they're starting to have this meeting when Teller pipes up and says he's done some calculations.
It is funny the way he does it. It's basically like, all right, let's begin. His hand is already up, clutching the papers, and Oppenheimer's like, we'll get to that in a minute. And Teller's like, the hell you will.
No, Teller is very much throughout this movie like pushing his thing to the forefront, whether that's what they're doing or not. But in this moment, it might be relatively important because these calculations he's done suggest that if they set off the atomic bomb, it might set fire to the atmosphere and destroy the world.
That's not important.
Not at all.
Just a little bit.
So they question this a little bit. Hans Bethe doesn't believe that it's possible, so he's gonna do the math again to double check everything. Meanwhile, Oppenheimer goes out to Princeton to meet with Albert Einstein,
who again is so perfectly cast it almost weirds me out.
One thing I like about this in Oppenheimer here is the team asks him, well, why are you going to go do this? You guys don't agree on anything. And to Oppenheimer's credit, despite his faults, the reason he wants to go talk to Einstein about this is because they have almost nothing in common. Which is an admirable thing to me.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the harshest truths need to be heard from the people who you agree with least.
Yeah, that's fair.
So he meets up with Einstein at Princeton. He shows him the numbers. He asks Einstein to run the numbers for him. nice little moment here. You, your you your appreciation of math is our mutual appreciation of math is maybe one of the only things we have in common, which is to say that they both don't care for math at all. And he is told that Hans Bethe is working on it, and so Einstein says, yeah, he'll get to the bottom of it. But the key point in this scene is just to say, hey, if the mathematics show that, hey, this is a legitimate possibility, you gotta stop doing this thing immediately and share what you know with the Nazis, so that nobody destroys the world.
Yep.
And this is once again just foreshadowing of the potential power that this new weapon could have.
You also do get a moment where it's very clear that these two have a bit of a relationship with each other. Like, there's definitely like some mutual respect going on here, and that definitely plays a part later on in the story.
From there,
so it does get a little tricky from here, at least just for now, because there's a lot of moments where, like, when I'm writing notes, it's just like science, 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 science. This scene happens. Science, science, science. So, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, I would definitely advise it. Obviously, it's a great movie.
No.
We're trying not to get too bogged down into science. We do get a scene here where Teller actually proposes the idea of, instead of making an atomic bomb, creating a hydrogen bomb.
Yeah.
Which would be considerably more destructive. His proposal is not taken well. It is rejected, and he gets very upset by that and attempts to leave.
Yeah, he's very miffed.
Yeah, he is very much a trying to do his thing his way pretty much all the time type person.
Yeah.
Which, you know, honestly, for a project like this, I get wanting to have someone like that around. I really do.
Yeah. It's never wrong to have people who will challenge you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's not doing the things that he should be doing and is assigned to do at this moment on the project, and instead dedicating all of the resources he can use to his own pet project. So I can see where the frustration also comes in.
Yeah.
For these guys.
But yeah, he does try to leave, and Oppenheimer convinces him to stay.
Yeah, he basically tells him, hey, you don't have to be a part of this division anymore. Just spend your time researching what you want to research about the hydrogen bomb. Along with this time, there's also some friction that's kind of growing between Groves and Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer is desperately trying to get his security clearance. And it's very slow going because of his past ties.
Affiliations as well.
His past affiliations and ties with people within the Communist Party. People aren't really looking to give him the security clearance, even though he's in charge of, you know, the Manhattan Project. It gets to a point where he's so frustrated by it, he actually just foregoes the clearance he needs and goes to Chicago, where they've started to get the first self-sustaining nuclear reaction.
Yep.
And at this point, and when he returns to Los Alamos, Groves just comes in and hands him a what for.
For some reason, it made me think about it when you said Groves. There was a moment earlier when they are determining like who is going to lead what individual projects in Los Alamos, that he and Robbie have a moment where Robbie wants to leave. He's like, I'm uncomfortable with this. You know, I don't want this bomb to be a thing. And Oppenheimer's like, you know, even if we don't make it, the Germans are going to make it. This is going to happen. We should make sure that we make it more or less for our side. Yeah. But the thing I really like in that is he does convince Robbie to stay on, but it's very off-putting going into that scene because Oppenheimer is wearing like a military, almost like a military dress uniform at that point.
Yeah.
And Robbie kind of like laughs at him at the end of the scene, is like, take off that ridiculous outfit. We're not in the military. We're not Marines.
We're not soldiers. We're scientists.
We're not soldiers. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you get to see him put on, you know, the hat and the jacket. That's like the symbol you think of Oppenheimer in this movie.
The classic Oppenheimer look with the hat. Yeah, that's a really fun scene. And once again, Robbie sort of acting as the conscience of the movie for Oppenheimer, being unwilling to be a part of a job that's going to lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. And he's consistent throughout this movie with that.
Such a good character.
Yeah, so it's at this, but it's at the point where Oppenheimer is confronted by Groves about going to Chicago, that Oppenheimer sort of confronts Groves with this idea of, you didn't choose me in spite of my past connections and controversies. You chose me because of them.
Yeah.
Because I have levers to play. You can kind of play against those levers and leverage them against me if you need to.
Yeah.
And it's kind of at where they come to this mutual understanding of, okay, Groves isn't as dumb as I thought he was.
Yeah.
In regards to this. So, because he's got a engineering degree from MIT or something like that, and he built the Pentagon and stuff. So, it's just another great scene. As we said earlier, Matt Damon just kind of steals the scene whenever he shows up.
So good. I like the train scene that I mentioned earlier. Is when he and Oppenheimer are both on there. He straight up tells him, like, the two of us are too valuable to travel by airplane.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that's cool and terrifying.
Yeah.
During all of the bomb, like all the Los Alamos stuff, he does get a call from his previous lover, Miss Tadlock.
Yeah.
Who says, I want to see you. Please come visit me. This is where he officially tells her, I've got a wife, I've got a kid. I can't see you anymore. I can't do this. I can't keep this going. She's sad. He's sad.
Yeah, during the conversation, she's kind of wondering where he's gone because he's kind of just disappeared off the radar. She hasn't really been able to contact him all that well. And they're kind of dancing around like she has an idea of what he's doing, but he can't disclose what he's doing because it's top secret. And that's the last we see or hear from Gene. So yeah, after that, Oppenheimer receives the news while in Los Alamos, and he goes off by himself, and he's having a massive breakdown about it. Like, he's feeling some type of way about it. And Kitty comes to find him, and she just kind of... Kitty tells him, you don't get to commit the sin and then ask everybody to feel sorry for you about it. Now's probably a good time also to go back and mention that slightly earlier in the film, there had been a moment where Kitty and Oppenheimer are visiting with Chevalier and his wife. Oppenheimer and Chevalier are in the kitchen, and they're having a conversation while Oppenheimer is preparing some drinks for all of them. And
they look so good, by the way. Just like him, just like dipping. It looks so fancy.
And Chevalier starts to get all kinds of like cryptic with Oppenheimer, and starts talking about this guy Eltonton, who they'd known at one point during the attempts to unionize the professors and stuff, and he was part of this organization that was all involved in that. And he was saying, and Chevalier says that Eltonton was mentioning how some people in the Soviet Union who are our allies in the war at this time aren't getting secrets shared between the United States government and the Soviet government.
Yeah.
And so, very carefully, Chevalier is basically like, if you wanted to...
It's one of those, like...
If anyone wanted to pass on...
If hypothetically, someone hypothetically had secrets hypothetically that they hypothetically wanted to hypothetically... Yeah. Like, it is very funny.
Yeah. And to Oppenheimer's credit, he just kind of shuts that whole thing down. He's not really... I think he's picking up what Chevalier's throwing down, but he doesn't want any part of it. Because he even says, well, if somebody did that, that would be treason.
Yeah.
It would. But if somebody wanted to.
Yeah. So hypothetically. It's like when you do the air quotes with like the fingers.
Yeah.
It's very much like that.
So that's really the last we see of Chevalier
Yeah,
in the
he gets
movie.
mentioned later, but that is the last time that we see him.
Yeah. So after the stuff with Gene Tadlock and Oppenheimer's breakdown, the next major thing we see is a Christmas party.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where um, all the people in Los Alamos, all the scientists have kind of gotten together. They're having fun. And
Let
then
their hair down a little bit.
they let their hair down a little bit.
It's a nice
Exactly.
scene. I enjoy this.
Yeah. And then Groves comes in and is like, I've got a Christmas present for all y'all. Early Christmas present. And he steps aside, and it's Niels Bohr, who I believe we mentioned earlier has been incommunicado because he's been kind of held prisoner in Copenhagen.
It'd be really funny, like, if he shows up, they just look at Jack Wade and be like, "You're out, bro. Bye."
That would have been funny. Niels Bohr pops up, gives a little speech about how he fell asleep how he got knocked out in the wheel well of a plane as he was smuggled out of Copenhagen. But he pretended like he was asleep to sort of save face with it. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh plays Bohr, and it's so good.
Oh man.
And then he and Oppenheimer end up having a scene together later on after all of this, where they're talking about. Well, Oppenheimer invites Niels to join the team because he really respects Niels. Niels is a forerunner of physics, and he wanted him initially for the project. And Niels is like, "I'm not here to help you, Robert. I'm here to talk to you about what comes next."
Yeah.
And it's very clear in this moment that Oppenheimer, I don't want to say it's a one-track mind kind of thing, but he hasn't thought about the potential ramifications of what happens if they succeed.
Yeah.
With all of this. And it's again bringing up those ripple effects. One thing begets one thing begets one thing. And he says, we're going to need to prepare the people. We're going to need to prepare the government to understand that you can't keep using these things. These things are dangerous. They're deadly.
Yeah.
Essentially, is what he's saying. And you're going to have to lead the charge because you're the one who's doing it.
Yeah.
And again, Oppenheimer's not quite ready to grasp that yet.
Yeah, I kind of think, at least when I watch this movie, I very much get the sense of as soon as his test is successful, that's almost like the immediate turning point where he's like, okay, now that I've done this, I can look at what comes next.
Yeah.
There's also a thing when I am shocked neither of us mentioned it, the fish bowls.
Oh yeah.
Whereas it's such a fun, like, creative visual where they have this like empty fishbowl, and as they are receiving the refined plutonium for the bomb, they're like slowly putting, I think it's like marbles, in it, and it's slowly filling it up, and like once they get to the top, this is it. It's just funny. As soon as Boris is down there, he's just like rifling his hand through the marbles immediately.
Yeah, they have one for plutonium and one for uranium, I think. And yeah, he's just playing with the plutonium and the uranium, and they're both almost full, so they have almost enough to build
I was
gonna
say, it is such a crazy thing because it's almost like cute because it's kind of like, oh, it's haha funny. It's like a reverse hourglass where you get a visual representation of time, where now as you see it fill up, you're like, oh, this is how far along they are in the project. This is how close they are to completion.
Yeah, it's
so smart. It's such a good movie making thing, man.
Yeah, it's been a proper way to track time because we've seen them several times just dropping 1, 2, 3 at a time. One time Oppenheimer has like 6 or 7 in it in his hand, and he makes a big deal of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's just. You're right. It's a very clever way to kind of keep track because this Christmas party ultimately is, I believe, December 44 because they're in the end game.
Yep.
Now.
Yeah. Speaking of end game, they do have. Oppenheimer sees a note, or I guess like a flyer that's posted where some people, even among the Los Alamos people, are starting to question, like, should we even continue with this.
Yeah.
There's the talk. I'm not sure at the time if Germany has definitively surrendered or if there's talk of Germany surrendering.
Yeah, it's April of 45, so Hitler's already. Germany has basically donezo after that. Basically, the entire war effort in Germany is fallen apart. So now all of the attention changes to the Pacific theater.
Yeah, and
with Japan.
Yeah, and they do have people there at the meeting being like, "Well, Germany surrendered, so why do we need to keep doing this?" And Oppenheimer's like, "Yeah, tell that to a GI who's suiting up right now to continue in the war. Just because Germany is out of it doesn't mean the war is over."
Yeah, because ostensibly the way that this was all pitched was we need to get this bomb made before the Germans succeed because the Germans were ahead of us. During the conversation with Bohr revealed that he had talked to Heisenberg at one point, and they discovered that Heisenberg took a wrong turn, and that's why now the Americans were in the lead to get the bomb. Yeah, so this is when we start to see them doing the final compilation of all these just individual blocks of the bomb around the core. And they've been testing different explosive devices and everything else.
Yeah. Dude, yeah, the image of them like literally building the bomb.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It is so fucking cool.
Piece by piece in these huge chunks, and it's just wild. And then this is when they go to the meeting with General Marshall and Secretary Stimson. To determine the final places that they're going to drop the bomb.
Yeah. Dude, we talked about it a little bit ago. This was one part of the movie that genuinely made me very uncomfortable to watch because as long as I have known of the existence of an atomic bomb, I have known where they were dropped.
Yeah,
I knew what happened. When we learned about it in school, obviously you learn.
Yeah, you learn. At least we did in most of our history classes, like world history. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those are the two where those are the two cities where the bombs were dropped to end the war.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, I just never thought about how they chose them. It is such a dark fucking scene. It's such a in the context of the war, of course this is the kind of conversation they would be having.
Yeah.
But for us to watch it, dude, it was very unsettling.
Yeah, especially when you have the moment where Secretary Stimson is like, I've taken Kyoto off of the list because of its cultural significance. Also, my wife and I honeymooned there, so it was nice. We loved it. So it's just
dark. It is just a dark scene, man.
Yeah, it's just. But this is also that first point where we've gotten hints throughout that some of the scientists working in other areas of the project have been with the meeting that was held at Los Alamos, and then there's been some petitions kind of drawn up to be like, okay, we the scientists who have developed this weapon don't want to see it actually be used.
Yeah.
Because of the potential power that it could be.
Yeah, it's almost like when you hear people talk about the threat of violence is sometimes more effective than the actual violence.
Yeah,
the idea that we have the bomb should be enough.
Yeah, and Oppenheimer and a couple of the other scientists who were in the building with them bring this to them, and they're basically just shot down no, we have to use this thing. And they're setting a pretty strict deadline of when we need to test this first bomb.
Yep.
Which is in July before the Potsdam Conference, where now President Truman can inform Stalin that we have a weapon that can end the war.
Yeah.
Without so much revealing exactly what the weapon is.
We have a weapon. What is it? It's a good one. It is such a good one.
After all that, we head back to Los Alamos, where Oppenheimer has brought his brother on, who really knows the land around Los Alamos, and he's supposed to be picking the perfect site
for the bomb
test, which has now been codenamed Trinity. because Oppenheimer really loves him some Hindu scripture. Once they find the perfect spot, they start building the tower. They finish assembling the bomb, and they start hoisting the bomb up. They put some like sleeping bags or something underneath the bomb just in case like it falls. How effective is that really gonna be?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Would an atomic bomb go off if you like just dropped it?
I don't know. Maybe. I am not a physicist. I did okay with it in high school, but
I fucking didn't.
But I don't know. I wonder.
It is a funny image.
I wonder that too, but it's really interesting. Same thing happens once they get the bomb up there. Then the day that they're supposed to do the test, there's this massive like thunderstorm that's covering everything, and there's like lightning and everything else. And I'm just like, okay, if the lightning strikes the tower, would that set the bomb off? Would that cause the reaction to happen? I don't know. It's not a chance I'd be willing to take.
That would be awful embarrassing to have to go back and be like, well, the bomb test worked. Oh, yeah, we lost 47 people. You lost what?
Yeah.
Well, lightning struck, and Zeus said, fuck those guys.
Even Robbie is there, and he makes a comment about like about not being around the giant metal tower that's housing the nuclear weapon with the lightning storm around. It's really funny. Robbie's the best.
He's so good. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty much up to the set piece of the movie. There are 2 or 3 other things that happen before it. He being Oppenheimer, does talk to his wife Kitty about letting her know, if the test is successful or not, because he's not really supposed to. Say otherwise.
He can't say. Kitty's not supposed to know anything, but he comes up with a little code because she's out there doing the laundry, and he tells her that if it's successful, he'll send a word to bring in the sheets.
Yep. And then we do get a last moment before the test with he and Groves. It is one of the moments that when I saw the trailer for this and I saw this moment, I was very much like, this is funnier than I thought it was going to be for this type of movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the scene where he and Groves are talking about, the chance that when we ignite this, it may very well, burn the entire world and whatnot,
because it's never been brought up to him up to this moment that this was even a remote possibility, even though the scientists all knew it like 3-4 years ago.
Yep. Groves is like, so what is the percentage? And he's like, near 0. It's like, what? What else do you expect? 0. I want 0.
Yeah, this all comes up because there's they're taking like bets. There's like betting pools on how big the explosion's gonna be, how many kilotons, if there's gonna be atmospheric ignition, if there's gonna be this or that. And Groves asks what the guy meant by atmospheric ignition, and that's where that comes from. And they're taking bets on all this stuff. Like, how morbid is that? I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
But
I get it. They've lived in this for years. They're just like, whatever.
And they're scientists and they're inquisitive. I get it. It's an intrigue thing, but it's also, I think, as Oppenheimer points out, gallows humor.
Yeah.
About certain things. But yeah, at this point, you basically just get the test. Like, they're counting down. Josh Peck's hovering his hand over the shutdown button just in case something goes wrong one way or the other. And can you imagine having that job?
No.
Like,
I could not.
You're the one in charge of shutting down the atomic bomb if something goes wrong.
Jesus.
But
there is one really cool thing where, so there are kind of like 2 or 3 different groups of people that are watching the bomb test. So Oppenheimer's group is in this little, from the inside, it looks almost like a bunker.
Yeah, it's basically a bunker.
And then where a lot of the scientists are grouped up, they are actually, most of them laying down facing away from the detonation thing. And they've got like little mirrors and whatnot.
Yeah.
Freaking Teller is just like, nope, fuck it. I'm looking straight at this bitch.
Yeah.
He has some type of like paste thing that he rubs over his face, puts on glasses. He is just staring right at it.
Metal, I guess. I don't know.
Dude, I like Teller. He just doesn't give a fuck. It'd be kind of funny if he was blind the rest of the movie, not gonna lie.
So all of these different groups are just miles away from this thing because, of course, you would be miles away from the atomic bomb when you don't know what's going to happen. And so you just get this countdown sequence of like the last like 60 seconds or whatever. And you've got this beautiful score that's just building the tension,
dude. This
in every
is
moment, and it's just
such a because this is a movie. This is like really what you built up to. It is at, I think very specifically, it's at like an hour 56. But I think it's very fitting that it is almost exactly 2/3 of the way through the length of this movie.
Yeah,
that you get this unbelievable detonation of this bomb.
Yeah, and it's all practical. It's just like tons and tons of like TNT.
Crazy, man.
But yeah, you get the flash of the bomb and everything else. Everybody's just kind of turned away or in the bunkers or hidden away inside their cars and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then everything is silent.
Dude, it
in
is
this moment.
So good.
And I love it on two different levels because obviously, you know, light travels faster than sound in a physical science sense. So of course you'd see the light first, and then with how far away they are, they're not going to hear the sound automatically. But it also serves to underscore the monumental size of the moment that just happened. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the atom bomb being exploded, being detonated for the first time successfully.
And the imagery of it is just this just giant eruption of flame.
Yeah.
As it comes out, it is sick as shit. It is so fucking cool.
And everybody, after the initial flash, starts turning around to watch, looking at everything. Everybody's just silent and just sort of in awe of the moment, essentially. And then finally the sound comes rushing back in with this just giant bang. Like, I remember sitting in the theater and it was just like
yeah.
But this is when everybody basically starts celebrating. Everybody except for one person. Yep. Isidore Robbie. Yeah. My man.
Because he knows, man. He just fucking
knows. This is everything that he's been against from the start. Yeah. And he knows what's about to happen next. Oppenheimer and the crew that was in the bunker arrived with everybody else at the base camp. He gets hoisted up on everybody's shoulders, the triumphant hero who made all of this happen, tells Kitty to bring in the sheets.
I think so he does send the message to her to bring in the sheets.
Yep. And then Oppenheimer's basically just pushed to the side of everything.
Yeah, we do get the scene where he goes in front of a lot of the people that have been there and gives them a speech in a very strange looking. It's kind of like a gymnasium, but they only built half of it.
Yeah, it's basically like a half court gym, basically.
It looks very strange.
But they've set up little risers where a bunch of people that are in the town of Los Alamos, the scientists and their families and stuff, are sitting there, and they're doing this crazy old stomp cheer sort of thing, and they're cheering Oppenheimer on. It is so,
like, if you imagine this era and you think of people being like, America, yeah!
They're exactly waving American flags and everything else. Like, this is the moment the war is won, basically. We're there.
And this is the moment where he really starts to realize the horror of what he has created.
This is where Oppenheimer finally understands what's truly happening.
Dude, this is such an amazing scene.
And the way that Chris Nolan shoots it is insane. It's you got like close-ups on Oppenheimer. Yeah. You got close-ups on Oppenheimer where like it's just extreme focus on Oppenheimer's face. Everything in the back is just completely like blurred out, and they even add in like these sort of shaking wobbles that are like he's being completely disoriented and unsettled. It's kind of a different way of doing like the dolly zoom shot from like Jaws and Vertigo, where everything's kind of disoriented at that point. And everything's getting louder, the walls are closing in on him. He starts to hear screams in the crowd, and then he sees a flash from the bomb, and then he sees people like a girl has skin flapping off of her face because she's getting burnt by the radiation. And then he starts to sort of wander after his speech out of the gymnasium again, and he looks down and he sees like a charred arm on the ground, and this scene is wild, man.
Yeah, it's one of those that it's almost kind of hard to explain. You really got to see it, but in context is when it sells it.
Yeah,
this is one of those scenes that I feel like it would have been really easy for it to feel extra preachy.
yeah,
But because of the way it's shot, the way it's done, and when it happens in the movie, it's all just perfect. It's perfectly done.
yeah. After the next morning, Groves and company are sort of heading off to take the two bombs that are assembled that are meant to go towards Japan
Yeah.
off, and Oppenheimer is trying to like get assurances like, oh, he's going to get informed about this and what happens and everything else, and Groves is like, yeah, sure, I'll let you know.
Dude, Groves is just like packing up stuff almost as fast as he can and just trying to GTFO.
Yeah, because at this point, Oppenheimer no longer has control over the bombs.
Yeah, now that he has made it, his purpose has been served.
Yeah. And to his credit, Groves does give Oppenheimer a call the next day, on the day that the first bomb is dropped on Hiroshima, and confirms that it was a success. The next thing you see is a picture of Oppenheimer on the cover of Time, the father of the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I mean,
fair enough. He probably would be Time's Person of the Year for that.
Yeah. For the next 10 years.
And it turns out that he's seeing this in the waiting area to go into the Oval Office.
Yep.
Because he has a meeting with Harry Truman, the President of the United States.
Played by Gary Oldman.
Yeah,
who is creepily well cast.
It's uncanny. Like, if you look at a picture of Truman and him back to back, it's not a complete one for one, but it is so darn close. And this isn't necessarily surprising from Gary Oldman, because throughout his career, he's just been a chameleon of sorts. Dude, he can look like anybody, be anybody. I mean, just think of him as Churchill a couple years ago in The Darkest Hour.
I was very much thinking The Fifth Element, but your thing's a lot better.
Also The Fifth Element. Like, Lost in Space, he's got his own thing going on in that.
I always forget he's in that.
They are having a discussion, and Oppenheimer starts to try to suggest that Truman start to engage in talks about nuclear power with the Soviet Union and the rest of the world, so that we can kind of control this whole thing, but also keep away from proliferating the weapons. Yeah. And Truman here is portrayed as being somewhat naive about the capabilities of other countries, particularly the Soviet Union, of getting the bomb. He flat out says that the Soviets will never get the bomb. Whether that's an accurate portrayal of Truman or not, I can't speak to. I feel like there might be some exaggeration, but this meeting did actually happen. And as Oppenheimer tells Truman that he feels he has blood on his hands because he was the one who created the bomb, and Truman takes pretty good offense to that. He's like, nobody's gonna know that about you and associate you with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They're gonna associate me with that. That's me. And he tells his people to, shoo Oppenheimer out. And he calls out, don't ever let that crybaby back in here again.
Yep. And
that actually happened. That's an actual thing that happened between Truman and Oppenheimer.
So at this point, we've really kind of finished the first timeline. again, that is the bulk of the movie.
Yeah, this is basically the main storyline and focal point of the movie. There are two other sort of framing devices of sorts that are met in the midst of this. There's one set. So now the rest of the movie really is just these two competing portrayals of hearings for Oppenheimer, and then the character we've referenced once or twice but haven't really talked about yet, which is Louis Strauss, portrayed by Robert Downey Jr.
Fantastically by Robert Downey Jr.
Yes. Louis Strauss is the chairman of the AEC, which is the Atomic Energy Commission, which is the board that's basically in charge of all things involving the atomic bomb.
Atomic, yes.
It's pretty self-explanatory, I guess. And then he was also the president of Princeton.
Okay.
He was involved in a school at Princeton for like physics and stuff, and he invites Oppenheimer there, and then they both commute back and forth to these AEC meetings because Oppenheimer is an advisor to the AEC.
Very appropriately.
Yeah, you create the atomic bomb, you probably should be advising the atomic bomb committee. Yeah. So Strauss's hearing is a Senate committee hearing where he has been nominated to be Commerce Secretary under President Eisenhower in 1959. Oppenheimer's hearing is in 1954, and it's because his security clearance has been revoked due to the affiliations that he's had throughout his life not meeting the guidelines. There's even one fellow, Borden, who writes a damning statement to the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, which is then given to the board that's in charge of discussing Oppenheimer's security clearance, that flat out accuses Oppenheimer of being a spy for the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Which is just crazy to me. Like, what do you have to do? I gave you the bomb to win the war on a silver platter. What else did I need to do for you people?
Well, first,
I am perfectly aware of the fact there's more to it than that. I'm just being shitty.
So, because of this, I guess we should probably tackle one by one. Let's do Oppenheimer's first.
Yeah.
So Oppenheimer's is kind of one of the major framing devices of the movie. He's doing this hearing and he's flashing back to the times we've discussed before.
Yeah. In
the past about the atomic bomb, his affiliations, and all of these. This prosecutor, Rob, played by Jason Clarke, is just grilling him about all of these past affiliations, all these people.
I love Jason Clarke, but like, why does he always have to play such shitty characters? He plays them well, but come on, man.
I guess that's why, because he plays them well.
I know.
I'm sure he's been the good guy in something somewhere.
He is like 0 for 7 for me. Like, he plays a kind of decent character in a movie where he is a gangster who robs people, but he's like the best of the gangsters. He's not a good person in those movies.
And so throughout this hearing, we're also seeing a lot of the people we've seen before in the flashbacks. Yep. We've got Teller, Robbie, Groves all come back as witnesses to what they saw at Los Alamos, and then whether or not they believe Oppenheimer is loyal to the United States because of his past communist ties. Because remember, 1954, this is the middle of the Red Scare. McCarthyism is in full effect. Yeah. People in like Hollywood are getting blacklisted and not working ever again. Like, this is the height of Cold War paranoia.
Yep.
And so any affiliation you might have had with the Communist Party in the past, whether you were, is coming back hard. And this is the part of the choices that Oppenheimer has made throughout his life, naively or not, the ripple effects of that are now coming home to roost on him.
Yeah, we do find out during this time that Chevalier, I believe, was removed from his teaching position and then had to like move home different country to try to find work.
Yeah, he had to. He went into exile. Chevalier did because of his. Well, let's call it what it was. It was spying.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer's brother got removed from his teaching post as well. There are one or two really impactful scenes to the story in the Oppenheimer hearings subplot. You've got the one where they're discussing the final meeting with him and Tadlock.
Yep.
And first you see him becoming severely uncomfortable with the conversation. And then there's a moment where he ends up undressed in the committee hearing.
It's so weird.
It's like it's him being so uncomfortable that he's being dressed down, basically, I think is what's being communicated. And also we kind of come into Kitty's point of view for a second there.
She sees like naked Tadlock draped over him.
Yeah, and they make eye contact. It's a weird moment. And then the other one is really like that final scene between Rob and Oppenheimer, where Rob is just grilling him on whether or not he'd gone with the hydrogen bomb, or anything like that. And it's throughout all this time that like Kitty and everybody else keeps asking, why the heck are you putting yourself through all this?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And Oppenheimer always says he has his reasons. And you come to find out through all the flashbacks and everything else, this is all just Oppenheimer punishing himself in a way for his sins of creating the bomb.
Yeah.
Like, it's not exactly martyrdom, but it's very close. A couple of other key points. You've got Teller here who is saying, Oppenheimer was great. He's always been loyal. I would be surprised if he hasn't been loyal. But I don't understand him, so I don't think that he should be in a place where people who don't understand him has power.
It's a very double-edged sword.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't think he's a spy. I just think he's very unqualified for this.
Yeah. But a lot of this comes down to Teller just being frustrated with Oppenheimer's reluctance to embrace the hydrogen bomb.
You didn't let me build the H-bomb, bro. Fuck you.
That's also been built up some. There's another small subplot where they keep showing an AEC meeting where they're discussing Russia successfully detonating their first atomic weapon.
Yeah.
And this is where Strauss starts to ask about the hydrogen bomb, because they're actively working on developing that at this point.
Yeah.
And Strauss wants to go that way. Oppenheimer doesn't want to go that way. And that's a part of an initial butting of heads that the two of them have. Ultimately, it ends with them doing exactly what they were sent there to do, which is to revoke his clearance indefinitely.
Yeah.
Groves tries to stick up for him.
Yeah. But it just is not enough, doesn't.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's very clear it didn't matter what was said.
It was
just such a one-sided thing the whole time.
Yeah, Oppenheimer's attorney didn't even have the ability to see any of the classified material, even though the classified material was being read into the record of the meeting.
Yeah.
So it's very much just a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
Of sorts. And they call it that in the movie.
That's funny. Kangaroo court, considering Cillian Murphy in Dark Knight Rises. Sorry, I just think it's funny.
No, you've got a point there. That's pretty funny. Hey, Gary Oldman.
Yeah, and then we do have the third subplot with Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Strauss. So we've been seeing him. He's being grilled, and there are a number of times where the committee member will ask him something and he'll kind of fire back, and he's had a few moments where he'll say something and get a lot of laughs out of the group.
Yeah.
But there definitely is a definitive turning moment where all of a sudden he's like, man, they're bringing up Oppenheimer a lot.
Yeah.
There is this guy that's with him the whole time. It seems maybe like he's a high-ranking assistant of some type that's telling him the whole time, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. And then at the end, he's like, you're fucked. Like,
Yeah.
you are just done, dude.
Yeah, he's kind of, to use a West Wing term, he's like the Josh Lyman of the White House or something. He's just a Senate liaison that's helping to usher through the
they should have cast Bradley Whitford. That would have
the
been so
committee
good.
process. They got Alden Ehrenreich. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's fair.
Han Solo from the Han Solo movie and stuff like that.
He's a good character, despite the fact I did not know his name.
Yeah. He doesn't have a name.
Does he really not?
The character, I don't believe, has a name.
That's funny.
But yeah, there's a moment early on where you see a flashback where Oppenheimer and Strauss first meet in the film.
Yeah.
And Strauss, as I said, is the head of this department at Princeton, and he wants to hire Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer goes there. They chat a little bit, and then Oppenheimer goes to talk to Einstein, who's just standing by a pond, observing the fish, I guess.
Observing the fish.
And so they're off in the distance. Strauss kind of comes up early, and the conversation ends, and Einstein is kind of just
he definitely
walking
gives
away.
him the cold shoulder.
Gives him the cold shoulder.
Hard.
Doesn't even acknowledge him, even though he says, "Hey, Albert, how you doing?"
Yeah. And doesn't Strauss say something like it was at that point that Einstein's attitude towards him changed?
Or he perceives it to have changed.
Yeah.
He even makes a joke early on in the committee hearing scenes where he jokes about how he was only preoccupied with that, and it gets a laugh out of a lot of the people in the room. But it's kind of funny that early on in the movie, Nolan's giving you everything you need to know about what Strauss's motivation is.
Yeah.
In this movie, in this moment, because come to find out at the turning point that you mentioned, we find out that as chairman of the AEC, and due to his conflict with Oppenheimer over the desire to get the hydrogen bomb and everything else, they've butt heads a lot in this movie when they share scenes together. Strauss is the one who set up Oppenheimer for the fall to get rid of his security clearance, to get him out of the way, because Oppenheimer's been spending so much time out on making the rounds, telling everybody, hey, we need to stop building these weapons. We have to stop doing this.
Yeah, so there was a question earlier about how Borden got the information that he had access to, because he had access to stuff well beyond what he should have had.
Yeah.
And then we do see that Strauss is the one who just straight up fucking gives it to him.
Yeah.
So basically, he had this just attack dog, and he just gave him exactly what he needed, and then just let him loose on Oppenheimer.
Yeah. And then Strauss, all through the hearings, is getting more and more concerned about the scientists he calls. He wonders which scientists are going to be speaking before the committee and giving testimony about him.
Yep.
Because as he perceives it, there's the cult of Oppenheimer.
Yep.
Which are the people who worked with him in and around Los Alamos. Because he was the mayor, the sheriff,
Dude, he was Atomic Jesus, man.
The founder of the town. Everybody worshipped him there in Strauss's mind. But he feels like the scientists that were in like Chicago or Tennessee or Berkeley maybe won't have as much of an effect for Oppenheimer as that.
Yeah.
So he's becoming more and more concerned and more concerned. And then you have this ultimate scene where Rami Malek, who's playing one of the scientists who was in Chicago,
Yep.
you see him in one scene earlier in the movie. 2 scenes?
Mm-hmm. When they are in like the hotel lobby looking thing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Then when they're in the bunker looking thing.
Yeah, that's right. Because there's that scene right before they go into the White House or into the meeting to determine the targets where they've started circulating that petition. You're right. But Rami Malek basically calls out all of this stuff about Strauss, how he set up Oppenheimer, how it's just a vicious campaign because Oppenheimer embarrassed him at a previous hearing, always went against him on the AEC board stuff, and ultimately the beginning of that crux was that one moment with Albert Einstein at Princeton. Like, that was the source of all his pettiness and jealousy and rage. Ultimately, that evidence is shown to be the one that's most damning.
Yep.
And Strauss ultimately fails to be confirmed, and he's the first cabinet member to not be confirmed since the 1920s.
Womp womp.
But it's by like 3 votes, and they really randomly drop John F. Kennedy into this.
That was such a strange, like, you're like, oh, wait, what?
Like, Strauss asks who the 3 votes were that swayed everything from being confirmed to not being confirmed. And Alden Ehrenreich, the aide, says that there were 3 votes. One was a young kid from Massachusetts trying to make a name for himself, Kennedy or something. And it's like, okay, that's great and all, but you didn't have to name drop John Kennedy like that, though. Like, I don't know. It felt like a little out of touch. Obviously, Kennedy becomes a pretty major figure for the next 3 years, not just and especially in dealing with the ramifications of nuclear weapons.
Yep.
But I don't know.
It's a little strange.
It was a weird moment. I clocked it. It's not like an issue or anything. It's just I would have been okay with just young senator from Massachusetts trying to make a name for himself.
I think that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But they chose to go for it, and can't really fault them for that.
Can't fault them for that. And it's at this point that Alden Ehrenreich calls Strauss out on his paranoia and delusion of, is it possible that Einstein and Oppenheimer didn't talk about you at all? Is it possible they talked about something more important? And so we finally get the flashback showing us that conversation at the end of the meeting. It flashes back to Oppenheimer and Einstein at the edge of the pond, and Einstein is talking about how basically the rest of Oppenheimer's life was going to end up being, because first they'll love you and then they'll hate you for it.
He's like, now that you've given them the bomb, they've gotten what they needed from you, and I mean, pretty much psychic visions just the rest of his life.
Yeah, and it gives us quick flash forwards to where in the mid to late 60s, Oppenheimer was given commendation by President Johnson. And there's this big lineup. Some of his friends come to shake his hand. Robbie's there, shake his hand.
They do a really good job with the aging of the characters there as well.
Yeah.
I feel like one of them was Teller there.
Yeah, Teller's.
I was like, there was one character. I'm like, they aged them maybe a little too rough.
Yeah.
Like, this person got some city miles on them in between the last time we saw them and now.
Yeah.
I feel like it was Teller.
It was probably Teller.
Like, the first guy, you're like, second guy, oh, Jesus, okay.
Yeah, Teller's really the one that was, like, the most focused on in that scene anyway, because there was an earlier moment after Teller testified against Oppenheimer, where as Teller was leaving, Oppenheimer shook his hand, and Kitty called him out for that, like, why would you shake his hand?
Yeah.
And so Teller now, in this flash forward, comes up and shakes Oppenheimer's hand, and Oppenheimer shakes it, but he offers it to Kitty. and Kitty just death glares him.
What a shocker.
Um, but anyway, that feeds into they'll love you, they'll love you, then they'll hate you, and then eventually, to make themselves feel better, they'll bring you back into the fold again.
Yeah.
The same way you did for me years ago.
Yeah.
And then after that,
shot,
like
man.
this final moment.
So good.
Albert Einstein starts to walk away, and Oppenheimer doesn't even look at him.
Yep.
Or follow him in any way. And he says to Albert, "Do you remember all those years ago when I brought you those calculations about how we could start a chain reaction that could destroy the world?"
Mm-hmm.
Einstein says, "Yeah, what of it? Like, what's your point? Where are you going here?" And just the final line, the final moment, is Oppenheimer just staring into the ripples of the pond.
Yeah.
And he says, "I believe we did."
Yep.
And that's the moment that stuns Einstein and just makes him walk off and ignore Strauss on the way in.
And then you kind of see, like, I guess it's just supposed to be like him imagining what it would have been like.
Yeah, it's the horror of the implications of what Oppenheimer has done and what could come if we don't check the nuclear weapons and the impulses to use them.
Yeah, the shot that he sees is him. I will say, dude, Cillian Murphy is selling like the horror going on behind his eyes in this scene, where you see the explosions like they would be happening, and it's like igniting the heavens is what it looks like. And it is, oh my god, the sound editing here, the buildup of music, the look on Cillian Murphy's face, the fantastic effects on the fire.
Yeah.
Dude, what a freaking ending shot, man.
Yeah, all the missiles just rise up all at once. There's like, I guess it's implied that there's going to be like hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And they're all just rising up, they're falling. And then after you see like Cillian Murphy, Oppenheimer, envisioning like all these just rockets in the air coming down, exploding all at once, and you just see the globe slowly being covered by fire.
Yep.
And then it comes back to one final shot with Oppenheimer. He closes his eyes, cut to black.
Yep.
We went over it in the intro. Like, we sat for a good, 5 minutes in silence after that. Like, not just us, the entire theater was silent.
Dude, I have never had that, profound of a feeling at the end of a movie.
Yeah.
It was absolutely stunning.
Yeah. One other thing I did want to bring up real quick is pretty much all of the scenes of Strauss, I'm sorry.
There have been so many times I've heard you kind of even mix the two pronunciations.
It
looks like it's spelled like Strauss. It should be.
I mean, you could
Strauss,
pronounce it.
Sorry.
You could pronounce it either way. Strauss makes a very big point in that first meeting with Oppenheimer that it's pronounced Strauss, not Strauss.
Yeah.
That goes into another bickering about their shared Jewish heritage and maybe their different views upon that as well, and how the names are pronounced. All of Strauss's scenes are pretty much shot in black and white, whereas pretty much all of Oppenheimer's scenes are shot in color.
Yeah, the only time that Strauss has ever seen in color is if he is sharing a scene with Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and even then, it's
only some. Yeah, if it's one where it is Strauss looking back or telling a story, then it's black and white. But whenever they have the meetings and it's still focused on the Oppenheimer part and Strauss happens to be there, those are in color.
Yeah, and as I believe I said in the intro, there's a couple different ways you could read that. It could be that Strauss is more black and white in how he views the events that unfolded versus Oppenheimer seeing the fuller picture of everything. Or you could argue that Strauss is very shot in black and white because he has a very straight and narrow view of the rights and wrongs of the moment, whereas Oppenheimer sees more of the full picture. There's different ways you can read it, but it's very interesting that Nolan chose to shoot one in black and white and one in color. Like, there's some dichotomy there that he's reaching for.
Yeah.
But yeah, this
yeah, if you can't tell, we fucking love this movie.
yeah, this film is phenomenal. Like, I've watched it 3 times through now, and it still hasn't gotten old, and it's a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
Like, when you can watch a 3-hour movie and it doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie, that's when you know you got something.
Yeah. This is definitely, like, in my, like, list of top 5 greatest films of all time, this is in my top 5. This is just absolutely incredible of a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, the casting, the writing, a lot of it for me is the casting. Like, the fact that all of these people, it feels so natural from beginning to end. Getting to see a lot of, for me, it was also a bit of nostalgia. It was getting to see actors I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Especially ones that I really enjoyed, and getting to see them in this film. Cillian Murphy, always been a fan of him. Absolutely love to see him getting the kind of recognition that he's getting. It's just a fan-freaking-tastic movie from one end to the other, even beyond the historical side, and I'm a big fan of the historical side. The science stuff, I'm glad I was a little nervous they were going to get really into, and I was going to be like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever.
Especially knowing some of Nolan's previous work, like Interstellar.
Yep, that's like literally the thing. I was like, oh god, what am I getting into? But no, this is definitely one of those movies that when I heard people talk about how good it was, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? That's only happened twice. Been Christopher Nolan films both times. When The Dark Knight came out, I'm like, people would not shut up about how good it was, and I went and saw it, and I was like, son of a bitch, they were right.
Yeah.
It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, and I love several Christopher Nolan films. As I said before, this is honestly, in my opinion, his best work.
Yeah.
I don't think it's particularly close either.
I don't know, man. I love Batman.
The Dark Knight is fantastic.
Well, I'm talking about The Dark Knight Rises. I want Bane.
Oh man, we're gonna.
No, I would definitely say Dark Knight.
I was about to say.
I do love Tom Hardy and I do love Bane, but
you're gonna put The Dark Knight Rises above The Dark Knight.
God no. No. But no, I will say that this one to me, with Christopher Nolan, sometimes he does stuff in movies I'm like, I don't like this that much. I see what he's doing. I see where he's going.
Yeah.
Not a fan. I feel like this is Christopher Nolan being the best Christopher Nolan, if that makes sense. Like, it sounds a little dumb, but I feel like this movie is really made up of a lot of what he loves to do in film, and it absolutely works on, like, firing on all cylinders the whole time.
I'd agree with that. This is definitely feels like the culmination of sort of everything that he's learned throughout his career and what he's done best and what he's done, especially when you look at the track record that he's got, like Interstellar, then you've got Tenet and Inception. Like, every film, it feels like, has built to this moment where he's just executed, and he finally got that Best Director award at the Oscars.
Very well deserved.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie, hearing the freaking numerous awards that this one got, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was hoping Godzilla -1 was gonna win every single category, even if it didn't, even if it wasn't capable of being nominated. It should have won them all, because it's Godzilla. But this, hearing the awards that this movie got, I was not surprised at a single one of them.
Yeah. And it's just kind of funny how, like, the hype came around for this thing. The whole Barbenheimer.
Oh my god, I forgot about that, actually.
All the Barbenheimer stuff, like double featuring. Can you imagine double featuring Barbie in this movie together?
Having seen both of them, I'm like, why did people do this? Like, first off, there's so much time to just do 2 movies back to back like that.
Yeah.
That's a bit much.
And talk about, like, whiplash. like tonal whiplash. Like, I'm not diminishing Barbie at all. The Barbie's fantastic, and Barbie has, like, some serious stuff going on in it but it's a completely different animal to
Yeah.
what Oppenheimer is in terms of tone and just like
I cannot believe I forgot about that.
so. And then I guess if I had to have if I did, and if we had done the Barbenheimer thing of watching them back to back,
Yeah, I'd be like, which one do you watch first?
yeah, I mean, I probably would have watched Oppenheimer first in hindsight, just because you get the fun after you get the heavy. But
Yeah, but after that ending, I don't want to watch the movie right after that.
fair enough, fair enough.
Kind of want to sit and like mellow in it for a bit.
Uh,
Yeah, dude. God, this movie's so good.
it's kind of funny that you mentioned Godzilla, because Godzilla was really born out of the post war.
Oh my god, yes. The freaking memes after the Oscars about this movie winning a lot of awards and then Godzilla -1. It's like, man, it's so crazy to see a movie and its sequel win the Oscar award. I was like, oh shit, that's so funny, but it's so fucked up.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the origin of Godzilla as a whole. It's a response to the after effects of the war and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and
Yeah.
sort of the power that nuclear energy could have in you. I promise you this is all not definitely setting up something that's coming in the very near future.
I'm so fucking excited. I am wearing a Godzilla shirt right now. You don't even fucking know, man.
I didn't even really think about it when we set the schedule forward, but it's kind of appropriate that
I thought about it. As soon as we put them back to back, I was like, hell yeah. This is what's up.
But yeah, phenomenal movie. Please watch it if you haven't, although the box office would suggest a good chunk of you probably have.
One thing I will say, if you watch this movie, especially for the first time and you're watching it with people, let them know, and you do it too, when that bomb detonates, you shut the fuck up. I watched this movie and for the second or third time, and my fucking phone rang.
Oh no.
I have never been so mad at a noise in my life as my phone ringing during that scene.
Well, that's the thing. You get so engrossed in it at the time.
Dude, it draws you in almost better than anything I think I've ever seen in a movie. I mean, it is. You are absolutely just enthralled with what is happening. Do not let people because I will admit, probably gonna get some shit for this. I am someone who tends to talk during movies. I can't help it. I love movies. I get excited. I want to share things with people. I want to be like, oh my god, that's the person from such and such. But do not let someone talk during that part of the movie. Absolutely, just do not fucking let them do it.
Yeah.
I will say, watching this movie with someone who we were joking. I'm so sorry if you hear this, Mom. I was joking about my mom earlier that if there's ever something that follows like multiple timelines at once, dude, she is gone. She cannot follow that kind of stuff unless I'm there like walking her through it. She would struggle with this film. And then we'd get like halfway through and she'd be like, my god, is this thing still going? But no, dude, this movie is so good. It's so creative. It's absolutely worth a watch. It's worth a second. It's worth a third. This is one I really hope comes back into IMAX somewhere down the road, which I imagine it will.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll get re-released at some point again in IMAX. I know they did it a little earlier in the year. We weren't quite able to make it to that.
Yeah, when we went to see this one, the theater that we went to doesn't have IMAX.
No.
Or doesn't have IMAX theaters in it. So I would really.
Yeah,
enjoy watching
I
this
really
on
hope they
IMAX.
do. I really do hope they re-release it at some point.
I imagine they will.
Because I'd really love to see this in IMAX again. Just the sound alone would make it worth it.
Dude, they were releasing a ton of films in
Yeah.
theaters here lately, so I'm sure this one will come back in no time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we hope you enjoy all of the wonderful information we've provided with you about the film Oppenheimer.
Yeah, let us know what you thought about the film if you've seen it, or anything else that you might want to discuss, and we'll be sure to get back to you.
Well, I'm Bradley.
And I'm Brendan.
And this has been Story Proof.